This is Colorado Matters from KCFR News. I'm Ryan Warner. Earlier this winter, a group of 100 Mexican citizens came to Glenwood Springs. They planned to work over Christmas and then go back home. But when they arrived in the mountain town, visas in hand, the jobs weren't there. They waited for nearly 3 weeks, biding their time in a local hotel. Eventually, many were bussed back to Mexico. Well, now more than half of those workers are suing for the money they expected to earn. I spoke with their attorney, Don Kaufman, and with one of the workers suing, Nicholas. He didn't want to use his last name. They both joined me from the studios of Aspen Public Radio. Well, Don, Nicholas, welcome to the program. Nicholas, let's start with you. What happened in Glenwood Springs when you arrived to work?
What happened was almost nothing. They promised us a job, and they didn't give us a job.
What kind of work were you expecting to do?
Supposedly construction. They were going to give us different kinds of tasks, but basically it was construction.
May I ask what drove you to come to the United States? Why did you seek work here?
More than anything, the lack of work in Mexico. And also, they tell us there's a good work opportunity. They tell us how much they are going to pay us, the amount of time, and it sounds like a good idea.
So, Don, that's a bit of Nicholas's story. How did 100 workers from Mexico end up in Glenwood Springs without work? What's your understanding of this?
Just basic illegal human trafficking. JNS recruited these individuals in Mexico and shipped them to the United States, to Glenwood Springs, Colorado.
This is a company in Texas.
In Texas, on behalf of Midwest Drywall. When they got here, it turned out that somehow the deal had fallen through. However, each one of these individuals was working for JNS Construction, Midwest Drywall, from the time period that they left their pueblos in Mexico until they were repatriated back to Mexico. Every single man came here with a valid H-2B visa. Every single one of these workers played by the rules, and every single one of these workers is entitled to be paid for the time that they were under the control of these employers and were traveling on behalf of the employers.
You say human trafficking. When I hear that term, I conjure up a very different image in my head of forced labor or kidnapping and smuggling. What, in your mind, qualifies this as human trafficking?
It's defined by the Palermo Protocol signed by the United Nations. And what it means is when you recruit, transport, transfer, harbor, or receive human beings by use of, amongst other things, fraud, deception, and the abuse of power, or putting people in a position of vulnerability. What these individuals were, and what Nicholas is functionally illiterate from a very small pueblo and very, very poor. He was brought to the United States with the promise of work. He worked on behalf of the employer. However, once he got to the United States, to Glenwood Springs, Colorado, he did not have the money to leave.
Now, Nicholas, tell me about that time you were staying in a hotel. Did you ask for help in terms of getting food, in terms of getting back to Mexico? Tell me a little bit about that time.
Sí, pedimos un poco de ayuda, ¿verdad? Porque we asked for help because there where we were, they gave us some food, but it was not enough. So yes, we asked for other people's help. Sí, nos apoyaron.
Did you have any money to spend on food, or was it the kindness of strangers that fed you?
Mire, de hecho, the people who paid for the hotel paid for the food, but they didn't pay much. Whatever I had as money from Mexico, whatever I brought from Mexico, I spent for food and for transportation. Pero llegando aquí no tenía nada de dinero.
So, Don, if the company was putting up these folks in a hotel and at least ensuring that they had some food, doesn't that show some good faith on their part?
Absolutely not. The facts are abundantly clear that the hotel was not paid for and the food was not paid for. The hotel, the Affordable Inn in Glenwood, is still currently owed $15,000. They could have thrown these men out very early in their tenure in Glenwood Springs and chose not to because there was so much snow and these men had nowhere else to go. Dos Hombres was the restaurant. Dos Hombres fed these men to keep them alive. However, they also have not been paid, and it's the charity of these two organizations that kept these men from starving to death and not having any housing whatsoever.
Do you have any understanding or sense of why the work wasn't available?
It's totally irrelevant. These gentlemen traveled on behalf of the employer, made themselves available, and are protected by Colorado statute. They're entitled to be paid for the time period they traveled on behalf of the employer, and that's all they're asking for.
The Colorado Department of Labor and Employment says that they haven't seen a case like this, at least in the last 3 years. The nonprofit Colorado Legal Services says they've seen cases like this but aren't sure how widespread they are. Do you have any sense for whether this is unusual or common? Have you looked at this?
We have never seen human traffickers sued for unpaid wages. We believe this is a case of first impression, and we'd love to find another case similar to it so that perhaps we could learn from it.
Don, of the 100 workers or so that were here, what happened to them? Give us a sense for some of their fates.
100 men were transported into the United States. When the deal went south, 35 just disappeared into the woodwork. We don't know what happened to them. 65 came to my office, and I represent 65 of the men. Catholic Charities and myself, we pled with the men to repatriate to Mexico. 55 did go back to Mexico. However, 10 could not afford to go back to Mexico and elected to stay in the United States past their visa expiration date.
And does that mean that the man sitting with you today, Nicholas, is here illegally?
Correct.
Correct. And Nicholas, what are you doing now in Glenwood Springs? Are you working? Tell me what life is like.
Pues más que nada ando trabajando aquí en Aspen.
I'm working here in Aspen. I haven't found a steady job. I work some hours here, some hours there, nothing steady.
No he tenido ningún trabajo fijo.
Why not go back to Mexico?
No he regresado a México porque cuando nos prometieron un trabajo.
Well, I haven't been back because when I got this opportunity, I had to borrow a lot of money. I had to pay for my visa, for transportation, to leave money for my family, to come over. So I got promised a job, I got promised good pay, I got promised a lot of time working here. So I owe a lot of money in Mexico. How can I be back if I'm not going to get a hold of work and money?
Ese es el motivo que no me he regresado.
Do you have a family back there that you're separated from now?
Sí, tengo familia.
Yes, I have a family. I have a spouse and 2 children.
If you were able to get the money that you were promised because of this work that wound up being unavailable, would you go back to Mexico? Would you be able to return to your family? Would you be able to pay off those debts?
Claro, porque de hecho mi intención.
Of course, because my intention was never to come over illegally. This is the second time I come legally. I have never tried to cross illegally. Unfortunately, you get promises, and these promises are not there.
Given that some of these men remain in the country in violation of their visas, is part of your case also to work so that they could return under better circumstances if they wanted to reapply for an H-2B?
We are working right now to potentially correct the status of these men's visas. We do not know how successful we'll be in doing that. The 55 who repatriated within the parameters of their visas have no problems whatsoever. However, there are 10 men that could not afford to return, and we're attempting to make that argument.
Have you had any response from, say, JNS, which is this company in Texas, or from the drywall company?
The drywall company has obtained counsel. JNS Construction Services, the employment agency, indicated that if we filed suit, they would declare Chapter 11, fold up, and go out of business. That appears to be exactly what they've done. It appears as if when we filed suit, they emptied their offices in Austin, Texas, and folded up. Their offices are empty, and we're having a difficult time serving them with process.
Nicholas, it may be a while before there's some legal remedy here. What are your plans until, well, you can get some money, perhaps through the legal system, or if not, what would you do?
No sé, seguir trabajando, pero
I don't know. I would like to keep on working. I would like to see a fast solution. The faster, the better.
Entre más rápido, mejor.
Well, Don and Nicholas, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Sí, gracias a usted.
Yes, thank you.
Don Kaufman is a Glenwood Springs attorney. We also spoke with his client, Nicholas, a Mexican worker who's now in the country illegally. They joined us from KAJX Public Radio in Aspen. JNS, that company in Texas which recruited these men, refused to comment for our story. Midwest Drywall, with an office in Glenwood Springs, offered a statement. Company officials say they never signed a contract to hire these workers. The contract that exists, they say, is a forgery. Quote, "We regret the situation and plight of the workers, but Midwest Drywall should not be a part of this lawsuit." End quote.